Well, so far Donald Trump has only threatened Russia and its allies with new devastating sanctions. India made a multi-billion-dollar deal with the Russians on the eve of Putin's visit to India. Its representatives were able to complete the years-long negotiation process to lease a nuclear submarine from Russia. The negotiations lasted for about a decade because the parties couldn't agree on the price, but now they've agreed that India will lease the submarine for 10 years for $2 billion. And before that, it became known that India is once again considering buying Russian weapons, specifically fighter jets and air defense systems, after refusing to do so for 4 years and choosing Western weapons instead. But if we look at the other side of this deal, we'll see just how desperate the Putin regime is. Russian officials have announced their intention to quickly increase purchases of goods and services from India, including attention, food, medicine, equipment, components, and workers. Because Russian workers are simply dying in the war against Ukraine. Russians have actually proposed a deal to India. We'll give you weapons and you provide us with food and medicine. My name is Alexei Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave any comment under this episode, and subscribe to my Telegram channel Pichi News. The link is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so with any donation or paid subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. I would appreciate any support from you. On the eve of Vladimir Putin's visit to India, its representatives finished years-long Ukraine negotiations. Bell, bell, hit the bell, hit the bell. It cannot be used in war. India needs a nuclear submarine to train its sailors and learn how to organize nuclear fleet operations while it builds its own vessels. India already has 2 nuclear submarines, but the Russian one will be bigger than the ones it currently has. The development of such a fleet will allow India to form a nuclear triad capable of delivering nuclear strikes from land, sea, and air. And now it is expected that the submarine will be delivered within 2 years, but due to the complexity of the project, the timeline may be delayed. Earlier, India had already leased a submarine from the Russians, and it was returned in 2021. And here we see a clear failure of Donald Trump's brilliant policy. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi, throughout the full-scale war of Russia against Ukraine, tried for a long time to maintain neutrality. He even came to Kyiv, where they hoped for his mediation in the peace process. However, the policy of Donald Trump, who first started a trade war and then announced in the summer a doubling of import tariffs to 50% when Indian negotiators already believed they were close to concluding a trade deal with Washington. All this pushed Narendra Modi to get closer to the Russians, but unfortunately that's not all. During Putin's visit, which begins this Thursday, the Indian delegation intends to discuss the purchase of additional weapons from the Russians. But that's not all. During Vladimir Putin's visit to India, which begins today, Thursday, the Indian delegation intends to discuss the purchase of additional weapons from Russia. Earlier, Bloomberg claimed that during Vladimir Putin's visit to India this week, New Delhi intends to begin discussions on the purchase of fighter jets and advanced air defense systems. Such an agreement, if reached, could complicate India's trade relations with the United States. The agreement could complicate India's trade. Reportedly, the discussion is planned to take place within the framework of the Privileged Strategic Partnership Agreement. Negotiations are expected on the purchase of Su-57 fighter jets and an upgraded version of the S-500 surface-to-air missile system. Although, let me remind you, after the start of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, India has drastically reduced its arms purchases from Russia. Russia still remains the largest supplier of weapons to India, and now, under Donald Trump, India has decided to return to large-scale purchases of Russian weapons. By the way, India currently has more than 200 Russian fighter jets and several S-400 batteries which were used in May during the 4-day armed conflict with Pakistan. And after that, the Indian Air Force asked the government to purchase more modern Russian fighter jets as they did not have enough aircraft. In addition, the Pakistani J-10CI fighters, which are made in China, shot down several Indian Su-30s and MiG-29S, so the Indian Air Force says, we need something more modern. But here it's obvious that negotiations for the purchase of new Russian weapons are unlikely to be completed during Putin's visit. At the same time, India is conducting trade negotiations with the United States, and they might still put pressure on them. But in fact, so far, even though Donald Trump doubled import duties to 50% in August, he hasn't forced India to stop buying Russian oil completely. Yes, they have reduced it, but unfortunately they haven't stopped completely yet. But what does Russia want in return? And here, hold on to your chairs, seats, sofas, whatever you're sitting on, so you don't fall off. This is a great power, just so you understand. There is a certain deputy head of the presidential administration of the Russian Federation, Maxim Oreshkin. So, this Oreshkin admitted today that they came to India to ask for food, medicine, and equipment. Yes, I'm not making this up. Oreshkin speaks here and mentions workers. Since Russian Ivan guys are dying en masse in the war against Ukraine, there's no one left to work in Russia. The cannon fodder is dying, so they need workers. He says, we'll invite Indians, and then comes a direct quote from Oreshkin. The Russian delegation and business have come here today with a very specific goal. We came for Indian goods and services, and we want to significantly increase our purchases of them. Moscow is very interested in increasing imports from India in 6 areas: consumer goods, food and agricultural products, pharmaceuticals, and other medical goods. Telecommunications equipment and information technology sector services, various components for Russian industry, as well as labor resources in the form of workers. We will facilitate access for Indian goods and services to the Russian market in terms of payments, logistics, and product certification. And besides, the Kremlin said today that Russia is practically begging India to boost exports to Russia of pharmaceuticals, food, chemicals, equipment, auto parts, textiles, and electronics. Well, it would seem that none of this will actually happen. Well, in return, Russia will continue exporting what it has for years: war. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.